West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight in week 4 of Russia's unprovoked war on Ukraine. And while the Ukrainian people continue to courageously resist, with Russian troops mostly stalled in their ground advances, it's become increasingly clear that Vladimir Putin has no qualms when it comes to slaughtering civilians. The U.S. State Department confirmed today that a U.S. citizen in the country for his partner's medical treatment was killed in an assault on civilians while waiting in a bread line in Chernihiv, a city that's directly on the path from Belarus to Kyiv. Russia continues to attack the Ukrainian capital, and it appears their strategy is to put the city under siege. Here's a dispatch from my colleague Richard Engel.
Russia has now clearly resorted to siege warfare. It has surrounded the city of Mariupol, and here in Kyiv, it seems that Russia wants to starve people out. This was one of the country's biggest food storage facilities, and it's completely destroyed.
It's a strategy that's been underway in the key port city of Mariupol, where I will warn you the images that you're about to see from a local hospital this week are graphic. Mariupol has been under siege for 16 days, with the Ukrainian government saying the situation is critical. 80% of housing has been destroyed and food is scarce. Hospital workers are doing their best to protect babies in incubators from shelling. Here's a Mariupol resident speaking Russian, describing the horrific situation as genocide.
Помогите! Это город жилой, жилые дома, СОС. Помогите Мариуполю! Убивают детей, женщин, больницы переполнены. Мы все здесь на что? Это ж я не могу понять, это геноцид?
Up to 1,000 people had been sheltering in a Mariupol drama theater, trying to avoid the deadly bombardment. And despite signs that read children in Russian at the back and in the front of the theater, Russia bombed it anyway. Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, who sits on the Intelligence Committee, said this morning there's evidence that the Russians celebrated the fact that they were trying to kill children.
We know from some back channel stuff that some encrypted apps that a lot of Russian military were using afterwards, they were cheering the fact that they had killed children. This wasn't some accidental bombing.
Thankfully, the bomb shelter survived the hit, but we don't yet know how many might have lost their lives in the attack. Residents were able to leave the besieged city today, many heading to the city of Zaporizhia, where Ukrainian musician Slava Vakarchuk posted a video of children at a hospital, which NBC has not independently verified. Vakarchuk said they were trying to get away from the Russian world, but the Russian army went after them. Lost legs, torn internal organs. These are real signs of Russian love. The Ukrainian government said today that at least 108 children have died and more than 120 have been injured from the war so far. Meanwhile, Russia is trying to gaslight the entire world about what's happening in Ukraine. This morning, the spokeswoman for the Kremlin's Ministry of Foreign Affairs claimed that the atrocities that Russia is committing are really just fake videos staged by NATO. Late today, Russia's ambassador to the UN echoed that propaganda, claiming the West is engaged in a hyped campaign of lies and disinformation. Meanwhile, in his desperation, Putin is lashing out, threatening to cleanse Russia of pro-Western traitors and scum. It is clear that he's been humiliated on the battlefield, where morale is low, and he's reportedly lost 4 generals so far. One of those generals was killed after Ukrainian forces intercepted his phone call on an unsecure phone, geolocated it, and attacked his location, according to the New York Times. The problem is Putin will only stop when he realizes the war is unwinnable, and so far, he appears to be doubling down. Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Cal Perry in Lviv. Cal, give us the latest on what you know of where you are and elsewhere in Ukraine.
So, look, I think the story of the last 24 hours, as you saw in Richard's report, is we're now seeing the direct targeting of civilian infrastructures. This is how civilian populations survive, and we're seeing these things be taken out. So in Kharkiv, for example, in the northern part of the country, a marketplace, a food market, directly targeted, we believe, by Grad rockets. There is an extensive fire there. This, again, was one of the last places people could go and get food. You're seeing that video there. In Cherniv, and you talked about this, a bread line, at least 10 people, quote, gunned down, and that according to the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. Again, waiting in line for bread. In the city of Kyiv, you have that grain factory, the largest supply of food for the city that has been directly targeted. So it seems clear that the strategy here that the Russians are now employing is not just to indiscriminately target civilians or directly target them as they leave these areas, as we reported on yesterday, but now to target the things that sustain life in these cities, to try to break the back of these civilian populations. What is most fascinating about this, and how you finished your lead in, is the Russians seem to be taking incredible heavy casualties on the military front. We heard in the past hour or so from the deputy prime minister, who said that she is working with the Red Cross, and they're talking about eventually transferring 14,000 dead Russian soldiers back to Russia. We can't independently verify that that number is accurate, except to say that in the last 30 minutes, we heard from President Zelensky, who has posted a new address to the nation, in which he says in that address, we did not want, nor did we expect, the bodies of some 13,000 Russian soldiers. Again, we cannot independently verify these numbers, but we are now hearing from officials here on the ground in Ukraine, government officials, that those dead Russian soldiers could number in this upwards of 10,000. It's maybe an indication that these two things are connected, that Russian troops, Russian army, and the officials and the generals who are now using these unsecured lines are not making the military gains in the speed in which they should. And so what they are doing is they are punishing the civilian population, and you saw it there in Mariupol. And it should be mentioned again, in that city, there are Russian soldiers who have put themselves in the main hospital of that city, who are using patients, wounded civilians, as human shield. It is a desperation that we have seen from the Russian army in places like Syria, in places like Grozny, but we are now seeing it play out across these eastern cities in Ukraine, where the situation is becoming so desperate that you have people who can't go above ground for food anymore out of fear of shells and because, Joy, there's no more food.
Yeah. Cal, if I can just quickly ask you, I mean, you've been a correspondent that's covered conflicts and covered, these kinds of situations before. I just wonder if it surprises you how sort of third rate the Russian army has turned out to be. This sounds like a ragtag army that doesn't have a hell of a lot of combat experience, let alone the kind of experience that could allow them, they could lay waste to the capital, but it doesn't seem like the kind of army that could take and hold it.
Yeah, so a few things absolutely have shocked me. One, the body of Russian soldiers in the streets of Kharkiv. So that tells us that Russia doesn't even control the battle space on the ground in the places that they're invading. I have never seen a modern army leave the bodies of soldiers behind. It is something the U.S. Army has as part of their code, as part of the mantra in some of these units. We don't leave anybody behind. I've never seen that in a conflict where the invading army is either pushed away so hard or so disorganized that they don't control it. The Turkish drones, we talked so long about this 40-mile convoy outside of Kyiv, right, of these armored vehicles that had basically been stalled, some of them stuck in the mud, stuck in the cold, running out of fuel. Turkish drones have been strafing these armored convoys. They've been killing a high number of Russian soldiers. These are very basic drones that should be able to be shot out or jammed. So there is an incompetence that the Russian army is showing very quickly. You know, it is scaring people here, this idea that Putin is being pushed into a corner. Right? What could he do? How big could the bombs get? Could he bomb here? That's a fear, but your point is absolutely right, Joy. The army has not done what it thought it would do.
Yeah, it's so much for them being a superpower. Cal Perry, thank you very much. Appreciate you. I'm joined now by Tom Nichols, contributing writer at The Atlantic, and Charles Carithers, former staffer for the House Homeland Security Committee, advising Chairman Benny Thompson, who is now principal of the consulting firm Cornerstone Government Affairs. Tom, I have to ask you the same question. I mean, you teach students of war. You teach our war makers. I have been, frankly, stunned. I mean, the idea that there were sort of two big superpowers, the United States and Russia, was predicated on the idea that Russia had a lethal army. What this sounds like is sort of a terrorist gang that can inflict a lot of damage and kill a lot of people. But the stories of, their army having to loot because they don't have enough food to supply themselves, having to abandon their vehicles because they don't have enough fuel. This sounds like a ragtag third-rate army. Are you surprised by their lack of efficiency and the lack of efficiency with which this horrific invasion has been undertaken?
My expectations were low, and the Russian army managed to get under them. Even the Soviet military at its height had discipline problems, had coordination and logistical problems, because these are not soldiers that are trained to think on their feet. I mean, we're used to thinking about militaries like the U.S. and modern European militaries, where they prize things like initiative and leadership, whereas the Russian military has always prized obedience and procedure. And they're paying for it now. I mean, they're poorly trained. Their officers don't care about them. They're the equivalent of their non-commissioned officer corps is often brutal and cruel to their own recruits and conscripts. When you throw a bunch of folks who've been trained with that kind of brutality into a situation where they have to fight for their lives in a war they don't want, this is what you're going to get. There is no other play other than to just unload all of your ammunition, flatten everything, and then run when you're being defeated.
It is Friday, the 18th of March of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, indeed. Well, the war continues apace, even though in Russia you better not call it a war. I read that some intelligence officials there, some mucky mucks up in the upper echelons of their intelligence apparatus, have mysteriously, or as I like to put it, conveniently disappeared. A couple of them have actually ended up dead. We don't know the cause of death, but we can suspect what it was. One of those convenient falls from a 5-story building, one of those convenient heart attacks, one of those convenient muggings, one of those convenient polonium poisonings, or even Novichok poisoning. Convenient. Okay. And while they're doing that, they are putting Marjorie Taylor Greene, Madison Cawthorn, Josh Hawley on Russian TV, state TV, to show the folks in the hinterlands who don't know any better, because all they get is Russian state TV, which is called Fox News here, just so you know. And been putting those folks on a loop and on blast, too, to prove that it's Ukraine who is committing the war crimes. It is Ukraine who is doing all the things wrong. And in fact, not only that, but the United States is in cahoots. And here's proof. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Madison Cawthorn, even Josh Hawley. Okay. Yeah, I like how Hawley's going after Ketanji Jackson. He's actually going full-blown Q, saying that she is pretty much in cahoots with child traffickers because she's gone easy on child pornographers. And it turns out that's a complete lie. There's no such thing at all. There's nothing about her decisions, her belief systems, that even cases that have come before her. All right. But let's go ahead and, go all racist and Q on the first black lady to be nominated for a Supreme Court justice seat. You know, Josh Hawley, the guy that gave the fist bump during the insurrection. And somehow he sits on the Judiciary Committee. I don't understand. If you are part of a coup, I forgot. Maybe we're not supposed to call it a coup, like it's not supposed to be called a war in Ukraine. You can't call what happened on January 6th a coup. In fact, you might be punished drastically in certain quarters if you call it a riot. It was just peace-loving Americans exercising their freedom of speech and assembly. Yeah. All right. They assembled literally a lot of shit and smeared it on the walls. Literally. I'm not kidding. That's literal. But somehow it's the hippies that are the danger to society. I had posted a little thing on the local Facebook. I know I'm not supposed to be on Facebook. I know. But regardless, and I'm not going to call it Meta. Okay? That's their parent company. I'm calling it Facebook. Anyway, posted a little thing on Facebook. There's a lot of people out there complaining, supposed business owners. And I always wonder how great a businessman are they if they're unable to get, some labor. I just don't understand it. But they're complaining that no one wants to work. They just want free money. And then when somebody does want to work, they're just so inexperienced. They're losers. Well, if you think your labor force is going to be like that to begin with, I guess that's what you're going to get, right? But I had recounted a conversation from way back in the mid '80s at Paul Hawkins' house in Mill Valley, and we were conversing pretty much about that dynamic of, I can't get anyone to work for me. And I just remember this so succinctly. He goes, well, I can't get anyone to work for me is not a complete sentence. And I remember we sat around him and kind of looked like, okay, it sounds like a complete sentence. He says, I can't get anyone to work for me for what I want to pay them. That is the complete sentence. So what you want to pay somebody and what you can afford to pay somebody are obviously two different things, all right? Because it's always a negotiation, isn't it? You offer something, a little low, and then they bump you up a little bit. And if they're willing to go for the low, even better. And if you can cheat them out of benefits and all of that without them ever complaining, that's fine. And when they do, just fire them and get someone else. That's how the dynamic kind of works, but it does sort of crack me up where people are complaining that, I had to eat shit when I was working, so everybody else should have to eat shit too. Well, I never thought that should be the case. I always felt that if I had to eat shit, I'm going to make sure other people don't have to eat shit to do this. Just to make some money, to put gas in your car, and pay your rent. Food? I don't know. I guess food's a luxury to those people. But it does kind of crack me up. They complain, no one wants to work. And then when someone works, they complain about, they're just like a bunch of idiots. Like, they want to make a career at McDonald's. And I had to remind them, actually, it's not 16-year-old tatted up, inexperienced kids working at McDonald's. The labor dynamic now is such that retirees like you and me have to work at McDonald's at minimum wage to try to keep a roof over their head. Was that their fault? Apparently, according to these ghouls. So, I don't know. We live in perilous times. We have active Russian operation going on right within the halls of Congress. And I'm looking at you, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm looking at you, Madison Cawthorn. Are you useful idiots? I think they're at least dupes. I would not be surprised if they turned out to be full-blown Russian assets. But for now, I'll accept that they are merely dupes. And that does not absolve them of a crime. Let's not forget that. Diminished capacity, my ass. Working actively against the United States of America with a hostile foreign power who is invading sovereign nations as we speak. Oh, do you think no one else does that? Do you think America's so pure? You know, that was chilling when he said that. Yeah, we've had our problems, we've had our mistakes, and we've stepped over the line plenty of times. But to equate us with Vladimir Putin? Of course somebody like Trump would. Reductionist idiot. You know, this is what massive amounts of money does to people, apparently. I might want to see a study. Would I do it? I don't think so. But I would like to see the study where they find out the political and, I don't know, empathetic abilities of those who are born into great wealth and then inherit it. And I might even say those who have scrabbled hard, too. Once they get money, it seems like they want to turn their back on the people. Well, I guess when you've climbed over the backs of other people to get to the top of the ladder, maybe you don't want them around anymore. So you might as well denigrate them for being losers because you were able to clamber over their backs. I was able to do it, so they're losers. Yeah, I would like to see the study that measures the empathy levels of those that have great wealth. And I would say, just from my lay observations, that those who grow up to be like the Rockefeller kids who say, you know, we really should be giving this wealth away. There's a lot more who really just want to hoard it, take it offshore, and have no affiliation to any nation except those that they can park their money out without being taxed too much, if at all. And we can look at the Panama Papers, and that's a good jumping off point. And then we can find out all of those who are still wanting to do and are doing business in and with Russia as we speak. And I'm looking at the Coke industries right now. In that thread, I had made a reply to some folks. Oh, it was about, you know, the elder labor force at McDonald's and these low-paying service jobs. Oh, they shouldn't be making $15 an hour. You know, I remember only making $2 an hour back in 1972, 73. Well, I remember making that much too. And you know what? I calculated it out. And you know what $2 would be worth now per hour? $15 an hour. So don't tell me these people aren't worth $15 an hour. Just because you made 2 is the equivalent of 15. And then, even with that, they don't get, you know, gas was only about 28 to 34 cents a gallon at the time. Oh, I'm sorry, it went up to 78 to $1 a gallon? And you were still making the equivalent of $15 an hour? Come on. Yeah, that's free money according to those people. But I had made mention that, you know, we wouldn't be in these straits if companies like Coke Industries paid their fair share of taxes. And I was not, I did that on purpose because Coke Industries is one of the biggest employers here in Southern Oregon because of the lumber mills. And it's not common to insult Coke Industries in this area. So I was expecting to get sanctioned, but I got to tell you, I think a worm has turned, because in that thread, rather than being inundated with a lot of negative, racist, homophobic, calling me a commie, etc., etc. It used to be I got inundated with that stuff. In this particular thread, it's going on a couple hundred people now who have engaged who think that was actually a good post. So shocking. It gives me hope for the area, because I suspected there are a lot of people quietly hunkering down, because if they lift their heads, they're going to, have it chopped off with the invocation of "you commie." So I just reminded some folks, there was a couple, obviously, who did invoke, the commie socialist label because you think a living wage is appropriate for our society. You commie. Yeah, well, that's as commie as the interstate highway system, which they still think is a commie operation, and that Eisenhower was a commie. Yeah, the Freedom Caucus, the T-Birchers, all of those, the maggots, they're all Birchers. Birchers from the old days, and now they've reconstituted themselves into a new Bircher. All right, well, enough of that. It is Friday, and we could just go on and on and on, but we did take the time here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to curate a show for you, and why don't we get into that and give you a little preview of what's upcoming? Well, actually, something that already happened here in the show is at the top. And yes, Putin has no qualms when it comes to slaughtering civilians. And yes, he is a thug and a war criminal. And I could care less what the Russian foreign minister thinks about that. Oh, we stepped over a line? Give me a break. A rhetorical flourish versus actual war crimes, mofo? All right. Gaslight me once, shame on you. Gaslight me and the whole world. F you, mofo. What's on the rest of the menu? A group of millionaire GOP lawmakers say CD requirements for wearing masks on air flights causes them ongoing financial harm. Why? Because they have to buy the masks. Washington State signed a law that prohibits Texas-style abortion lawsuits. And as black colleges remain on edge after receiving dozens of bomb threats in recent weeks, the FBI said they identified 6 suspects who are responsible for most of the racially motivated crimes. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Bulgaria's former Prime Minister Borissov was detained for misuse of EU funds after a nationwide police operation. And Russia's finance ministry said it transferred a $117 million bond interest payment to an account at Citibank London in an attempt to avoid a default on government debt. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. Could you please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and could you please send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month? I'll tell you why. Because that helps us. How does it help us? Well, it helps us by helping us pay our bills, the continuous software and hardware upgrades, so that we can continue flying under the radar and continuing this powerhouse of resistance as we have been doing for almost 11 years of 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio. So thank you for your generosity. It's only going to get worse here in the future, and I know times are tough. Interest rates just went up. Great. So, but when and if you can do that, it would really help us. And I'm sorry to tell you, we need the help. So thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then really try to get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. But sometimes it doesn't happen until I get the podcast up. What the hell? It's been a scramble the last couple of weeks here. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up those podcasts that I just mentioned by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And the deep archive of all of our Netroots Radio team shows over these many years. It can be found at the Netroots Radio Library at the Internet Archive at archive.org. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of The American Independent by Emily Singer. A group of more than a dozen Republican members of the House and Senate filed a lawsuit against the CDC claiming that the federal mask mandate for airplane travel violates their constitutional rights. They also said the requirement causes them ongoing financial harm because they have to purchase the masks. On its face and as applied, the mask mandate violates members' right to be free from unlawful regulations. And members will be irreparably harmed unless this court enjoins defendants from enforcing the mask mandate. Reads the lawsuit, which was filed by that greasy-haired Tom Massey, joined by 15 other members of the House and Senate. Even though major studies have found that masks help stop the spread of COVID-19, the lawsuit claims that there is not enough evidence to suggest masks are useful. Well, they also say it wasn't a coup on January 6th. So who do we trust? The mask mandate states that masks help prevent people who have COVID-19, including those who are pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic, from spreading the virus to others, but provides no findings that shows masks have limited the interstate spread of COVID-19 through conveyances and transportation hubs, the lawsuit reads. However, research has shown that masks are a low-cost and effective way to help stop the spread of COVID-19, which is transmitted through airborne droplets. I mean, this is just basic stuff. The CDC links to a number of these studies on its own website, including one study from Stanford Medicine and Yale University that found 1 in 3 symptomatic and asymptomatic cases of COVID-19 were avoided when surgical masks were used in a population over 60 years old. And the study was conducted in Bangladesh from November 2020 through April of 2021. Now, upon filing the lawsuit, the signatories put out a news release that also includes lies about the effectiveness of masks. The CDC mask mandate does not protect public health and is beyond the agency's statutory authority. Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona, one of the members who filed the suit, said in a release, "The CDC's arbitrary mask mandate has caused so much damage to this country." Dan Bishop from North Carolina said, "There was never any science behind the mandate, and now it's time for America to officially close the chapter on CDC's political science charade. I'm proud to join Representative Massey in filing this lawsuit." Yeah, you're working for Vlad and you're trying to kill more people through a bioterror campaign. Jesus. The lawmakers also claim to be harmed by the mask mandate on airplanes because of the great financial burden it imposes.
The requirement to wear a mask pursuant to the mask mandate requires the members to purchase masks, causing them ongoing financial harm in the form of out-of-pocket expenditures for the purchase of each mask.
Well, I don't know. Why don't you lobby to have your masks supplied through your franking privileges? Jesus. Of course, members of Congress earn an annual salary of $174,000 a year, and that's not counting any of the money that they get on top of that from Russia and Saudi Arabia. Many of the members who signed on to the lawsuit are wealthy. Matt Rosendale from Montana is worth between $7 and $32 million. Well, that's a big range there, isn't it? And Ralph Norman of South Carolina is worth from $5.5 million to $43.4 million. That's an even greater range. What the hell? And a search on Amazon found that a pack of 100 surgical masks costs $11.99, or if you wanted to round it up, 12 cents per mask. Well, I got to tell you, anecdotally, when I've gone to dinner with people, the richer they are, the shittier they tip. Rachel LaCourte from the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, a Washington state measure that prohibits legal action against people seeking an abortion and those who aid them, was signed into law yesterday, Thursday, by the governor in a move designed to rebut recent actions by conservative states. The bill signing comes days after the legislature in neighboring Idaho approved a bill that allows lawsuits by potential family members to enforce a ban on abortions performed after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Yeah, they signed a law that if you're raped and become pregnant, the family members of your rapist can sue you if you want to seek an abortion. But they don't have to provide any care for the baby that comes, but they can take custody. I don't know how this is working, but, you know, it's not the best and brightest on that side of the political spectrum now, is it? Conservative legislatures in several states have either passed or proposed new abortion restrictions in anticipation of possible changes to the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling. And that Idaho bill allows lawsuits by potential family members to enforce a ban on abortions performed after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Yeah, when you don't even know if you're pregnant or not yet. Washington's measure, which takes effect in June, prohibits the state from taking any action against an individual seeking to end their pregnancy or for assisting someone who is pregnant in obtaining an abortion. The language is in response to a Texas law which took effect last September and which bans abortion after roughly 6 weeks of pregnancy and makes no exceptions in cases of rape or incest. The enforcement of the law is left up to private citizens, like vigilantes who take the law into their own hands, who can collect $10,000 a pop or more if they bring a successful lawsuit against a provider or anyone who helps a patient obtain an abortion. Binkley brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and he is out of the Associated Press. As the nation's historically black colleges remain on edge after receiving dozens of bomb threats in recent weeks, federal law enforcement officials said they have identified 6 suspects who they believe are responsible for most of the racially motivated crimes. More than a third of America's 101 historically black colleges and universities have been targeted by calls or emails threatening to set off bombs on their campuses since early January, with the vast majority arriving during the celebration of Black History Month in February. The threats are being investigated as hate crimes. At a congressional hearing yesterday, Thursday, federal law enforcement agencies said they are working aggressively to make arrests in the 59 cases, calling the case their highest priority. All 6 suspects are juveniles, according to the FBI. The Biden administration announced a series of actions in response to the threats. The Education Department on Wednesday issued guidance to help colleges navigate threats and to get help from federal agencies. Vice President Kamala Harris, the nation's first black vice president and an alumna of Howard University, a historically black institution in Washington, also notified colleges they are eligible for grants meant to help schools recover from violence. Now, no explosives have been found in connection with the threats, but students say the prospect of violence has loomed over their lives. The threats have prompted lockdowns and evacuations, sometimes late at night, leaving students anxious and uneasy. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, who's your baddie? Warning, thematic spoilers. Okay, so The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, who did Cloverfield and 2 Planet of the Apes, co-written by Peter Craig, who wrote Bad Boys for Life and both Mockingjays. I should also mention director of photography Greg Fraser, who is straight off of Dune, and supervising art director Grant Armstrong, who most recently designed Spider-Man Far From Home, because, oh boy, does this movie look good. Early on, Bruce Wayne says the criminals think he's hiding in the shadows, but they're wrong, because he is the shadows. Go Craig and Reeves, archetypal Batman line. And yeah, never has Gotham been more dark, or more wet, but even nightly rains can't wash away the grime, or the crime. Never has Gotham felt so overwhelming, like it's too much for one vigilante to handle. Speaking of which, Robert Pattinson gives us a gaunt, goth-haunted, overtaxed Bruce Wayne 2 years into his war to clean up the city. We learn he's burning through money and doesn't care because now we finally hate the rich, and the film needs Wayne to not be the Jeff Bezos of crime fighting. No more mansion and cave, Bruce and Alfred are based in Wayne Tower in the city. Also, Batman works with the cops more than in any previous film because even though Gotham is all about bad cops and corruption, we have to show that there are good cops too. At least it means they don't underuse Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. Paul Dano, they've transformed the Riddler into a fringe loony serial killer. The Batsuit is like Kevlar on steroids. The Batmobile looks and sounds like Satan's muscle car. Everything was going so well when the giant penny drops to reveal it's all one big daddy story. You see, originally Bruce Wayne horrifically lost his parents, causing him to devote his life and fortune to a war on crime. But over the past few decades, it's been changed to Bruce Wayne having lost his father. Oh, and that chick who wore the pearls and furs Dad bought for her. And so also in The Batman. Oh, guys, and it is almost all guys behind this film. So close, and still the same lame. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Good eating habits developed in childhood can last a lifetime, but getting children to eat their fruits and vegetables is a common problem. Eating them adds important nutrients, helps control weight, and reduces the risks for many serious illnesses. Children in the U.S. are eating more fruit. However, 60% of children get fewer fruits than recommended, and 93% don't get enough vegetables. Childcare, schools, and school districts can help change this by meeting or exceeding federal nutrition standards for meals and snacks, including fruits and vegetables wherever food is offered, and helping children learn about and taste fruits and vegetables. At home, parents can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables with their children and provide them as snacks, even if it takes many tries. Also, parents can include their children when shopping for, growing, and preparing fruits and vegetables. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
This is 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Today we are honored to be joined by Mina Bose, the Peter S. Calico Chair in Presidential Studies and Executive Dean for Public Policy and Public Service Programs at Hofstra University. Professor Bose, tell us about the democratic norms of federalism and limited government.
Federalism and limited government are principles that ensure that the American political system protects people's liberty, their natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of property or happiness in the Declaration of Independence. Federalism means that power is shared between the national government and the states. And while the national government is supreme over the states do govern our daily lives. They provide opportunities for civic participation. So while we have multiple levels of government, as well as local governments, which weren't listed included in the Constitution, having these levels ensures that no part of political life can intrude too much on our natural rights.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mina Bose. It's been an honor having you on the podcast. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. This was the day postal workers walked off the job in New York City. The strike caught many by surprise. The workers had not received a raise since 1967 and were not permitted by law to engage in collective bargaining. The postal workers were offered a 4% raise, but declined the offer, noting that Congress had voted to raise its own wages by 41%. Frustrated, the National Association of Letter Carriers Local 36 voted to strike. At the time, a staggering 35 million pieces of mail went through New York City each day. The strike ground the mail to a halt. The lack of correspondence impacted Wall Street. The stock market fell due to the lack of correspondence, and some feared Wall Street would be forced to close during the strike. President Nixon took to the airwaves to condemn the strike as illegal. He ordered the strikers to return to work. They did not comply. Instead, the strike grew to include nearly 200,000 workers in 30 major cities, even as postal union leaders urged the workers to return to the job. The rank-and-file members stayed firm. After the strike had lasted a week, President Nixon again addressed the nation in a televised broadcast. He announced the commencement of Operation Graphic Hand, ordering 25,000 members of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and National Guard to deliver the mail in New York. This only served to anger the striking workers even further. The inexperienced National Guardsmen who had no training in how to deliver the mail were not able to get the Postal Service moving. Finally, the government began to negotiate. The postal workers won an 8% increase in wages and proved their power as a united labor force.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit under pretty foggy conditions at the moment. We are expecting a high, though, in the mid to upper 60s, mostly cloudy throughout the day, with winds out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then cloudy with rain developing around midnight tonight with lows in the low 40s. Winds will continue out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we are expecting rain overnight exceeding about a third of an inch, and then a steady rain in the morning tomorrow, with showers continuing in the afternoon, highs in the upper 40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it a rain total of around a quarter inch. Pollen is rated as none outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 21 or at 20 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 4. Barometric pressure locally is holding steady at 30.19 inches. Visibility is less than a mile, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 60 degrees and sunny. Paris is 60 degrees and sunny. Rome is 63 and fair. Kyiv is 36 and sunny. Kabul is 56 and clear. Hong Kong is 71 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 40 degrees and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 72 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 and partly cloudy. And New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bulgaria's former Prime Minister Borissov was detained yesterday, Thursday, in a nationwide police operation following investigations by the EU Prosecutor's Office. The Interior Ministry said Borissov had been taken in custody for 24 hours and did not elaborate on the accusations against him. A large-scale law enforcement operation was underway in connection with 120 cases of the European Public Prosecutor's Office in Bulgaria, according to a ministry press release. Borissov, age 62, was detained along with other members of his opposition center-right GERB party. Among them, the ex-finance minister, a former head of the Parliamentary Budgetary Commission, and Borissov's media advisor. Police declined to comment on the motives behind the arrests, but local media said the cases were about misuse of EU aid. Media reported about searches and seizures by police in different cities across the country. Former three-time Prime Minister Borissov resigned after a newly formed party won last year's general elections, pledging to uproot widespread corruption. Borissov himself had several times been the object of corruption allegations during his decade-long tenure, but has denied any wrongdoing, and no charges have been pressed against him. Bulgaria, a member of both the EU and NATO, also has come under scrutiny from its Western partners due to its long-standing problems with corruption, adhering to the rule of law, and preserving freedom of the media.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the diner of life. Russia's finance ministry said it transferred a $117 million bond interest payment in an attempt to avoid a default on government debt, but left it open if the money actually reached foreign investors by the deadline. A ministry statement carried on Russian state media said the money had been transferred to an account at Citibank in London and that the ministry would make a statement later on with results of the transfer. Citibank had no comment. The payment was due on Wednesday, which would be the first on foreign currency debt since Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th. Russia is facing increased financial isolation after sanctions have frozen much of the government's hard currency reserves held outside the country and barred transactions with some Russian banks. The head of the IMF has said a state default is no longer an improbable event, and ratings agencies have slashed Russia's credit rating to below investment grade or junk. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.